Hi, this is Patsy with a Z. Welcome to Joy on Paper Live, a program for writers and those who dream of writing, and for everyone who wants to know the story behind the book. And boy, oh boy, do I have an author today who can tell you the story behind millions of books. It's amazing. She is such a great best-selling author, J.T. Ellison, and I am so happy to welcome you, J.T. Ellison, to Joy on Paper Live.
Hi, it's good to
Oh,
see you. Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's a joy. It's a joy because this book comes out just at the right time of the year. It's the time when you want something like this to curl up. It's just getting a little cool outside, and you just get in that comfy chair and you have the drink of your choice. Depends if you start this book in the afternoon, you might be having tea or maybe coffee. If you started like a little bit later, for me, it's like maybe a gin and tonic, which is good because as you get into it, you like, oh boy. And then somewhere around 2 o'clock in the morning, you're thinking, why am I still reading this book? But that's what you do. J.T. Ellison, you are amazing. You are a best-selling author. What can I say about you? How did you get this way? But we'll talk about that. I want to just start with the name of the book, A Very Bad Thing. And a very bad thing turns out to be a very good thing for you. And I want to say something special about this cover. Usually, I don't like any pink. Do you remember Jane Eyre? No matter what Mr. Rochester wanted to get her, she didn't want to wear pink. That's my sister's color. She is a pink girl. She's been pink all her life. Everything is pink. But for me, I could never. But then when I saw this, there's something a little bit in this tone that they got. This, I don't know, reminds you a little bit of blood. Maybe I don't know something about it, doesn't it? Isn't it a cool cover?
It's incredible and it's so sinister. It's a sinister
Yeah.
pink. It is not a joyful pink.
Yeah,
It
no,
is,
my
yeah.
sister Natalie is known as a connoisseur of cozy mysteries. So she wears a very nice pink. This one is sinister. And I get books ahead of time. So I had it on my book table and I'd walk by it and I said, okay, because I have so many books to read and get prepared for. But on the third time I walked by it and then I just sat down. It was late in the afternoon and I was still going strong at 2 o'clock. I love this kind of suspense thriller.
I'm so glad. That's my job, right? Is to distract you from your everyday and keep you up way past your bedtime.
Yes, and keep you from watching all of the repeated news and news cycles. People are going to have quite an exciting thrill with this book because you are a New York Times and USA Today best-selling author, 30 plus novels, my goodness, Emmy award-winning co-host of a TV show, A Word on Words. You've accomplished a lot, right?
Yeah, it's really funny because I still feel like the rookie debut author who was fighting and clawing her way into the scene. And suddenly it feels like a switch has been flipped, which is really an interesting moment where my career feels like it has momentum and my focus is on writing the books. And I've got a great team around me to help with the marketing and the PR and the publishing. And my job now is to create the best books that I can possibly create. And that's very freeing and also just a little bit strange because I'm not used to that. I'm used to having to wear all the hats and do a lot of the work on my own. And it's just been in the past few years that it feels like that has shifted. And everybody around me is holding me up and the readers are holding me up and they understand it's, hey, I need to take a social media sabbatical, and they're like, go do it, write more books. The pressures have changed with the success. It's very different than it was the first time I got a starred review or something. It's just different now. The fan base is bigger, which is fantastic. The body of work is bigger. There's a lot more backlist. But there's something different about this book. I feel like the momentum, and it's the cover, it's the pink cover. We all know it's
No,
just
no,
the pink.
it is
Nothing else.
this. I was thinking of it as creepy pink, which is ideal for you. And let's look at it. You get so, as you said, you're in a great position. You get such wonderful blurbs from people. And I like Meg Gardner's because she's been on my program. And once again, J.T. Ellison hits it out of the park. A very bad thing is twisting, juicy, suspenseful, and heartfelt, and a single sitting read. And that's true because that's what I did. And I couldn't put it down. And I also couldn't put it down. So thank you, Meg. That was wonderful. And really, everything that you're getting, all of these wonderful, just little blurbs that you get, they come easy now for you, I think, because people want to blurb for you. But did it start off that
Never,
way?
blurbs are easy.
Never
That's
easy?
always, you go hat in hand to your friends and say, could you please help? Because everybody is so busy and everybody has got their own situations and their own deadlines. And asking a friend for a blurb is something I take very seriously. And I would so much rather my editor just go do it. Because
Go and do it. Go and do it. But when you started, what year was your first book published? I can't remember now. I looked it up and I, what?
2007.
2007.
Hmm.
And did you get a blurb for that one?
I did. I did. I got a lot of blurbs for that one. I was actually part of a marketing collective that we started that debut year because we were worried that so many of us were, social media was just beginning. We weren't even, Facebook actually came along halfway through the year that we all finally got on Facebook and started meeting our readers on the online world instead of in person. But we were really worried that we weren't going to make a splash because most of us were coming out in paperback original, which is the way they did crime fiction back then. And so we started this group called Killer Year. And the international thriller writers thought it was a really interesting idea that a group of debuts would band together. There was another group in the literary fiction space, in historical women's fiction, called the Debutante Ball, which I thought was really great. So Killer Year got a lot of attention from the folks at International Thriller Writers and actually out in the trades and everything. So we raised our own, with the rising tide lifts all boats. We lifted all of our boats. And that was really cool because when ITW did get involved, they assigned us all mentors. So my mentor was Lee Child. And he really, oh my gosh, he really influenced my career in so many ways, giving me advice, blurbing my book, blurbing. We ended up doing an anthology of short stories of the debut novelist of 2007. He blurbed my story in that. And then that, of course, led to other doors being opened. And that's the cool thing about the crime fiction community. We are so open. And for people who, kill people for a living, we're incredibly open and supportive and loving and really nice. Everybody in this community is really nice. So it was truly a blessing. And yeah, because of that, I was able to get a lot more blurbs to kick things off. That helped. That helped a lot.
Yeah, that was a nice start. That was a nice start, and you can't get better than Lee Child, who, of course, has been on Joy on Paper many times. And I remember we did one of his birthday interviews, and he was talking about really something like this, where he enjoyed being able to mentor people. When he started, he didn't. He was like, he came out of the box. Whoa! Just from being fired from his job in England and just having to face the whole publishing world, and he did it. And I know that he's helped so many people, and that's
Oh, yeah.
wonderful. He's
A
fantastic.
generous soul, an amazing writer, shares in how he built his craft, shares in supporting people, in blurbing people. He's just a superstar, and I will never, ever be able to repay him for the boost my debut year.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. He's fantastic. And I get such a kick out of talking to him. I
Yeah.
remember when, I just, he's just so much fun. And we have a new Reacher book out, just came out. Lots of things to talk about with that one. But, and I just noticed we have the same chair, I think. We have the same
I
chair.
think we do. I think we
Yeah.
do.
I love
I
it.
was actually looking at ways I could turn so I'm not showing my headrest, but oh,
Yeah.
isn't it great?
Yeah. I love it
If
too.
you're
Me
if
too.
you're at your desk all day, you need good
Yes, you
supportive
need a
chair.
good chair.
Yeah.
So there you are, starting off, whoo, starting off with a bang in a way,
With a
which
bang.
most authors don't have that power behind them. And so it went from there, and now we're in 2024. Can you believe it? I know what happened to those pandemic years. We got all,
Oh yeah, we just skipped over a few years. It's so bizarre.
yeah,
They just don't exist.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like a blur to me. It's all a blur. When you started this book, I should ask you, just because everybody's going to be reading this book, and when they get to the first part, um, now, of course, this is about a famous author, the main character, not so much the main character, but the person that we are interested in, and that is who killed Columbia Jones? And I want
Mhm.
to ask you this very serious question. Have you ever fainted at a book signing because you saw somebody from your past? And is that why you wrote this book?
Not exactly.
Tell us a dirty old story about that one.
Yeah, I get very nervous. I'm not public speaking. I became an author so I could sit in my room alone and play with my imaginary friends. So getting out on stage was something that was really terrifying at the beginning. It's still a little scary now, but I'm used to it. I can do it. 20 years in, it's not as big a deal as it was before. But yeah, this story actually came about. Editor friend of mine was on Twitter, and there had been a tragedy in the Midwest, and she didn't understand why President Biden couldn't just hop on a plane and go there and comfort the people that were there. And I felt I don't normally get involved on Twitter, but I felt like I needed to step in and explain why, because I worked in the White House and I did advance work when I was there. And advance work means you go in advance of your principal and you make sure that the lay of the land is what it needs to be, that it's safe, that there are ingress and egress, that the appropriate food is there, that security is lined up, that the hotel room has all the things that you need to have. Meanwhile, Secret Service is actually sweeping around and doing all of this stuff. So I explained to her that it's not like they can just pop him on a plane. He's the president of the United States, right? It's not like you and me, we could go, but he needs a lot of prep work and advance work. And then I said to her, think about it like this. What's the worst thing that could possibly happen with an author on book tour? Can you imagine if one of your authors was killed on book tour because you guys hadn't done the advance work? And I went, oh, that's a
Oh,
book. That's a book right there. That's a book. And then we were in our town little south of here called Columbia. And I said to we were eating ice cream in the town square, and I said, Columbia is a really great character name. Columbia Jones. Who killed Columbia Jones? Messing around. And it was amazing. It was those two things in the same week, just clicked and boom, there was a book. There was a book right there.
isn't that
And that's what
exciting
that
when that
happened.
happens? That ha-
Yeah,
you
it's
know,
fabulous.
sometimes these ideas come to you and it's fully formed. It's
Mhm.
and that is such a thrilling thing. I've done that now with a couple of books that I'm writing, which I never seem to finish, but I will one day. It also happened with my radio program. I had never been on radio, knew no publishers. I didn't know any published authors. I knew nothing about the whole business. And one morning at 4:15 in the morning, I said, I'm going to do a radio program and talk to authors because I want to help them sell books. And
Yeah, that's the fun
but
thing.
exactly 2 minutes, I knew exactly what I wanted to do. I knew the name of the program. I knew my log line. I knew everything. On the day I started, the guys in the control room had a bet that I wasn't going to last a month because I was so shy. I had never spoken to an author. But I sat behind the microphone and then I started talking like crazy. And now I can't stop talking.
There's something about the microphone. I used to love doing radio. We used to do a lot of radio before there were podcasts and stuff. And that was, they would set you up and you'd be sitting there with a microphone and you would do a different interview every 5 minutes and because you're live all over the country going through all of the things. And I was so scared the first time I did it. And then that microphone and I heard the voice and oh, this is fun. So I love doing radio. I love that you've been doing this. Thank you for doing this for us. It's great.
But now I have this fun of doing the YouTube so I can see people because I love to see people. And I love to
Right.
see you. And you have to
No.
now tell us this story about who, let's say, who did kill Columbia Jones, because this is a fun story. And tell us how you decided to do it from many points of view. It's not,
Mm.
yeah, explain this, the whole process. Once you got the idea yourself, how am I going to write this book?
So Columbia Jones, obviously you mentioned, is a world famous author. She imagine every major author you've ever heard of who has got hundreds of thousands of copies, and she's huge, right? She is all of the big ones rolled into one. So she's a household name, and she is murdered in the first chapter of the book. She is the main character, obviously, because we have to solve her murder. We meet her very briefly, and then she's killed. It was not an easy book to write because I needed a lot of points of view. There's 8 different points of view, I believe, in this book, not including hers. And I was reading John McPhee, who is a really great writer for the New Yorker. He has a book called Draft Number 4. And he was explaining, he was writing an article. It was a really big, it was one of his first really big articles. And he had no idea how to do it. So he was laying on a picnic table, staring at the sky, trying to figure out how to tell this story. And he hit on an idea of the subject of his story in the center and telling the story through the spokes of the wheel, right? If you think about a wheel and the spokes, telling the story through the people who had interacted with that person. And that would make it a richer, bigger story. And I read that. It's literally in the first couple of pages of his book and went, aha, this is how I'm going to structure this book, because I need to know what the structure is for a book. It's really important. All my books have a shape. So this one is that spoked wheel, and every spoke is a different point of view. And so we have the reporter, Riley Carrington, who is going on the road with her, with Columbia, on tour to write a article for her magazine, East Fifth. We have her daughter, who is her publicist, maybe her co-writer. She's very much involved in her mother's career. That is her job, is to promote her mother. We have the police who are investigating the murder. We have a number of other people who have something to do with Columbia's life. And it was a lot of fun to put together, but that's where the original idea came from. So thank you, John McPhee. I wouldn't have been able to figure it out without him.
So one of the things about this book, I also counted the points of view, and I think I did get to the number 9, because something like this where you have all of these people and they all have secrets, they all have things to hide, and of course the biggest one is Columbia. We're not going to tell. It's sometimes it's difficult to tell people where all the strings go, but it's complex. And comparing it to the wheel, is it's exactly that. You have all of these little, and then you have to follow it along, and it all comes back. That those spokes all come back to Columbia and her big secret, and why this whole thing happened. But I want to mention, it's so funny, when I was reading it the first time, I said to myself, oh, I was thinking not too many authors get that kind of acclaim, that they, when they go on a tour. Mary Higgins Clark is the one that comes to mind. She was on my program many times, and she used to tell me about in the early days. The last few years, they weren't doing as much, just like they're not doing, publishers aren't doing, even for her, although she'd get pre-sales of 1,000,000 books. But when she'd go on tour, they were lavish. She'd have a suite. They'd send a young man. She always said they were such handsome young men from the publishing house. And she liked
Bring
that.
on the handsome young man. That sounds fantastic.
Yeah, they carried her bags and all navigating around new towns and stuff. She said all I had to do was look beautiful, and that was it. And so that's how I envision Columbia.
Yes. So yeah, absolutely. She's got that old school author glamour. Yeah, touring has changed very much. Now they tell us to take an Uber. But I co-wrote with Catherine Coulter for a very long time. And the life of a #1 New York Times bestseller, who's done that again and again, is slightly different than the life of somebody like me. So it was very fun to be out on the road with Catherine and see that kind of three-ring circus is a good term for it, because there's a lot of people, and they're moving you here and they're moving you there, and there's a lot of meetings and meet and greets and just all of the things, and it's really fun. Columbia's death in this book is shocking, and it was really hard to write a main character who was not. I always set a challenge for myself. I think having a dead main character was probably the biggest challenge that I've ever had.
With all of the other characters, and let's talk about some of them, because let's start. In a book like this, we need a detective, and tell us about your detective, because he takes an important part. Tell us about Sutcliffe.
So Sutcliffe, he's an interesting guy. So the murder takes place in Denver. So the Denver police are the ones who are in charge of the homicide investigation. And Sutcliffe he's an Iron Man guy. He's very Colorado for me. I grew up in Colorado. So he's very much a Colorado guy. Likes to mountain bike, does all the things. And he picks up this case. On the surface, it looks like this weird murder. As it turns out, it might have some ties to his past as well. So it's funny that's everybody's part of the story that maybe have intersected with Columbia Jones in the past. And maybe one or two people know more about what she's hiding than others. And of course, there's a Nashville connection. There's always a Nashville connection in my book. If it's not set here, they're going to end up here at one point. And yeah, something from his past has come back to haunt him.
Oh, yeah. I like him very much. I like Colorado guys. I like that whole vibe that he gives off.
Yeah, he would definitely be a good one to carry the bags.
Oh, yeah. And with a book like this, of course, I see it as a film in my head. I worked in Hollywood for a while. And when I read a book, and after like about 10 pages, when I start seeing it as a movie, and I almost forget, especially when I get late at night, I see the whole thing. And I was trying to think, who's going to play Sutcliffe?
Yeah, Chris Evans would be great.
Yeah,
Yeah,
good choice.
it would be awesome. That based him off that anyway. That's perfect.
Okay.
Yeah, he's
We
great.
have to send him a link to this interview.
Yeah, let's do that. If you know, send his people the book.
I will.
Feel free.
I will. Let's just say when you think of Hollywood, and there's some juicy roles in this.
Yeah, they really are.
And female roles.
There's so many. It was really funny. The first time I turned the book in and my editor read it, she goes, I love all of them, but whose story is this? Because everybody has a part to play in this story. But it really is Riley's story. Riley is this young reporter, right? And she's on the brink of breaking out, and Columbia handpicks her to enter her life and open her door. Columbia's been a very private person for a very long time. And there are reasons why, of course, but she is inviting Riley into her life, and Darian is very much against this because Darian she doesn't want to have another person influencing her mother. She wants to be in control of everything that Columbia is doing. So it's really a slap in the face to her. So she and Riley immediately have conflict. So, and that's the fun of a thriller, right? You have so much conflict between the characters, and then conflict between the story and the plot and all of that.
Yeah, that is the fun of it. And one of the things is, as you're talking, I'm nodding my head. I'm saying yes. That's exactly what how I envisioned it too. This conflict between those two girls, and then there are other characters that you bring in, and with different points of view. It was a little bit complicated. This was not as easy as when you have one point of view or two points of view. That's one thing, but when you have all of these, how did you get into all of their heads?
That's not as hard as making sure that the story that they're getting, that they're imparting information into the story that hasn't been imparted before. Darian gets a letter, and everybody gets a letter. But we need to make sure that moves the story forward instead of just seeing everybody get the letter. So it's a very delicate balancing act of how do I impart the information, move the story forward, and be true to the character and their experience as they're going through it. Everybody's grieving this death in their own different ways. Some people aren't going to make any money off of her anymore. Some people are going to miss her because they love her. Some people are not going to miss her because they hate her. And there's, of course, because it is the world that we live in now, there is an online kerfuffle and everything goes south there. And she's completely, poor Columbia, posthumously is dragged through the mud online because she can't defend herself, right? You can't. Once the mob has come for you, there's no defending yourself. You just have to absent and hope for the best. It's like the worst thing that could possibly happen. But she's already gone, right?
Yes.
So the aftermath of that is really difficult for everybody involved.
I'm glad that you mentioned your editor. And it's so funny. I'm working now with some people. As I said, I've been doing this program for the radio program for 9.5 years, and I've over the years I've had quite a few of my listeners get jump into NaNoWriMo, which is the National
Mhm.
Novel Writing Month. And so they're always asking me for advice, and they ask me all sorts of questions. So I encourage people who are dreaming of writing to write. But I always tell them, be logical, that you're going to write 50,000 words in November, but that's not the book. And the first year I did it, it didn't occur to me that no one realized that. I had a guy on December 3rd. He emails me, I finished my book. Patsy, I'm so happy. Where should I send it? What publisher should I send it to? And I said, oh my gosh, what did I do here? And I had to bring him down to earth and say, this is a process. It doesn't go like that. So I'm glad you
And
mentioned the word
50,000
editor.
words is not a novel.
Yeah, and exactly.
That
Worse than
novella.
yeah, worse than that, there's a process, and I'm glad you mentioned editor, because that's one of the first things I said. You're gonna have to have an editor at some point. Oh, I think it's perfect, he said to me. I said, yeah, let's talk to me after you give it to an editor. So you still use an editor. If you, after all of these books, millions of books, you use an editor, I just want all of my viewers here on YouTube to understand. Even the most famous authors, best-selling New York Times best-selling author, USA Today best-selling author, and she's got millions of books, and we're going to talk about that. But you use an editor, right?
Absolutely. My editor she's a partner. She's part of this great team that's surrounding me, but without her, none of this works, right? I love being edited. You can't see the forest for the trees when you've spent months in a book and months in these characters' lives and heads. You can pull it all together and it can be a really good cohesive story, but you need a professional who does this for a living, who can come in and give you another pass at it and say, hey, have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? Maybe we should do X. They're not trying to make the book theirs, they're trying to enhance what's there. And I've never had an editor who didn't bring something to the book and make it better and stronger. It's absolutely, you have to, obviously, the editor buys the book for the publisher. So they're your voice both inside the publisher and directly to you for your book. They're an incredibly important part. If you indie publish, you need to find an editor who you trust, who is excellent, who will be able to give you all the things that a traditionally published author gets from their editor as well. A developmental editor is really helpful, especially if you're starting out, to try to just learn the functions of it. I learned so much about writing. Even though I've got a degree in writing, I didn't learn about writing until I started being edited and I started having copy edits and I started having all of this other input into my manuscript. So I love being edited because it's like you cook a meal and everything is perfect, but it tastes a little bland. And so you put some salt on it and all of a sudden all the flavors come out. That's what a good editor does to a book.
Exactly, exactly. That's so important for people to know. And there's a level where at certain points when an editor might find something that's wrong in your book, something that isn't quite right, and they tell you.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. They're going to say, hey, you've got this timeline wrong. It's not going to be just somebody's eyes are blue on one page and green on another. This is a much more comprehensive look at the book and how a reader is going to interpret the story. And usually they're reading it for the first time. So it's really helpful that they're seeing the story cold. I don't like to turn in pages early or anything like that. I want them to be reading this for the first time as a finished book so they can see the whole story. I can't see the whole story until I'm done with it anyway. So turning in pages is just a moot point because it all changes. But yeah, a good editor will be able to see all of that and say, ooh, hey, you forgot all about this, or this doesn't make sense. Why are we doing this? Or hey, murder your darling here because I can tell that you think this passage of prose is absolutely spectacular, but it's not moving the story forward. So they can be very, very good for a book, for
Oh,
sure.
absolutely. Especially when they say you're going a little bit in the wrong direction, or your character's not at one point changes just style, that it doesn't seem real. And that happens sometimes after you've been working on something for, like in my case, I've been working for years. Your life experiences while you're working on a book can change your attitude about a character too.
Oh, certainly. We're different people from morning to evening, right? So there's no reason why the book wouldn't be different from morning to evening, especially if you're making appropriate progress on it. If you're writing every day, touching it every day, it's a living, breathing entity just as much as we are. And we're different in a 6-month time frame. When start writing the book to the end of the book, or however long it takes, you're a completely different person. The world's a different place. So you have to be nimble on that, and you have to be open to having somebody else point out, hey, maybe what you did here in chapter 1 doesn't match up with what you've done in chapter 59, because there's been months in between the writing of those things.
And of course, if your editor doesn't discover it, whether it's the main editor, the copy editor, if they miss something, the public will find it.
The reader is king, and they will find it, and they will send you emails and say, I can't believe you made this mistake. Oh my gosh, I made such a huge mistake in one of the Catherine books. I was on a plane last night and I was thinking about this. It's just dumb mistake. Something that I know better. I know this. There's a reason why I even wrote the scene, because I'm familiar with being a pilot on a plane, right? I'm actually familiar with this. I know that you cannot go to heading 420. It doesn't. We don't go past 360 because that's the circle. I know this. And it made it, Catherine didn't catch it. The editor didn't catch it. The copy editor didn't catch it. The first readers didn't catch it. My dad read it and didn't catch it. And he's the reason I know this. But a sharp-eyed reader wrote me and said, are you an idiot? And I was like, yes, I am. I must have written that on April 20th. I was like, oh, it's 420. I'm going to go to heading 420. Or it was just a typo and it was heading 320 and I just hit a 4. I don't know. But, oh, I was so mortified. But yeah.
I would have caught that. My husband was a pilot, and I flew many hundreds of hours with him, and I would have thought maybe she's like going into sci-fi, into a new universe.
A new universe where there's more than 360 degrees in a circle on a compass.
Yeah, I thought,
north, south, east, west, and north, south.
Yes.
It was so embarrassing. So they can save you from making really stupid mistakes like that. And sometimes they don't, but 99.9% of the time, somebody will catch a really bad, egregious mistake.
Yeah. And the worst thing is if somebody finds a mistake like that, and I so hate that when they'll find a mistake in a book, sometimes the town will be in the wrong state or something, and they'll give a 1 star for something like that. I know. Authors work so hard, sometimes for years on a book, and maybe they put a town in North Dakota that should be in South Dakota. What the heck? Right. Dakota is all the same.
No, that's a good copy editor is your best friend. Whenever I find a copy editor who's really excellent, I will do anything to keep them. I've got actually for my Joss Walker fantasy series, I've had the same copy editor on all the books. So the robust relationship that we have been able to build of she understands my voice, she understands what I'm trying to do, she knows not to put semicolons in dialogue, the little peccadillos that go into it, but she also is just so incredibly good. And there's often a Merriam-Webster dictionary entry in my comments. I don't think this is the word you were thinking that it Nonplussed. Everybody thinks nonplussed means you're not worried about it. No, it means you're confused. It's one of those words that just doesn't make any sense. Nonplussed should be, no big deal. So, yeah, it's
exactly.
Good
they are such detail people. That's the lovely thing about them. Let's get back a little bit to this subject, because we can't give away too much about what happens in A Very Bad Thing, because people have to read this book. And as reviewers have said, you sit down and you read it and you don't want to get up. So make sure you go to the bathroom first and have something.
Get your tea and cookies, get the cat,
and be ready.
Get your blanket.
Exactly. Especially the blanket if you're reading late into the night. Yeah, exactly. So you got all this way. That number million is a nice number. It's one of those numbers that everybody can envision and dream about, whether it's having $1 million or having a million, whatever. But when an author thinks of a million, that's duh, that's something.
Yeah. Yeah.
When did that happen, and how did you
Hmm.
know, and what did you do, and what, like, who got the champagne?
When did that happen? I don't know when the first million copy printing happened. It was sometime around probably 2013, 2014. I'm almost at 3 million in print. I do not count the Catherine books because I don't have access to those numbers. So I'm sure that it's much larger than 3 million. Catherine sells a lot of books. But it's utterly surreal because every one of those is a reader. I mean, it sounds like 3 million. Okay, that's a lot of books. That's a lot of books sold. Every one of those is a reader. And that to me is the coolest thing ever. I never in a million years thought that I was going to be an author, that this was going to be my life, that this was going to be my career. I tried on a lot of hats before I settled down here. And I had a lot of luck. You make your own luck. Obviously, you make your own luck, right? You can't just, there has to be an element of you're doing the work, you've got some talent, you're willing to be dedicated, and you do your promotion, you do all your stuff, right? This is not just a one lane road to getting to 3 million copies sold. But it is something that is completely surreal to me that on the other end of those numbers is a reader who picked up the book, sat down with their blanket and their tea and read long into the night, or were sitting by their mother's bed in the hospital as she passed, or were taking chemotherapy and needed something to get through it. The letters that I get from the folks who the work has transcended for them a little bit and taken them away from their pain, that is everything to me. That just makes me want to sit down and do it more and get many more millions out there, because if I can help one or two people, if I discuss something like in Tear Me Apart, I tackle mental illness and it's one of us. I tackle infertility. If I can help somebody through a situation because they see themselves on the page, then I have accomplished everything that I ever set out to do in this life.
That is the beautiful thing about being a writer, the lives that you can touch. And actually, you've touched many more than 3 million, because your books are in the libraries, and so some of those books have been checked out by so many people. And yeah,
And
it
ebooks and audiobooks and used books. Yeah, it probably is a little bigger than that, but I can only go by what the official numbers are off of my royalty statements. And I do keep track. I've got I love an Excel spreadsheet. So
uh,
I've got a number of years tracked from the very beginning. And so I do know how many books have sold. And that's, yeah, I'm not tracking any of the other because there's no way to do that. But yeah, there's a lot. There's a lot out there. So
it's
thank you
mind
guys. Thank you. That's Thanks for reading the books.
yeah, it's mind blowing when you think about it, because you start off, and as a writer, you don't know, you have no idea where it's going to lead you, and you just pray and work hard. And that's the thing about being a writer. You have to be persistent. You can't give up. And you can't give up if an editor says something that hurts your feelings, then look into it and fix it. Or if fans, and sometimes the people who do reviews can be so cruel. But luckily, I don't think you've had too many of those. Uh,
Oh, I've had plenty.
no,
Oh, oh yeah. No,
you've had
it's
some.
yeah. I have rules about reviews. I actually do read my reviews because I find it fascinating to see how people are interacting with the book. I've got a real thick skin, right? Just whatever. Everybody's entitled to their opinion, whether they love it or hate it. The thing is, if you're going to read your reviews, you have to believe the good if you believe the bad. And as artists, we are programmed to believe the bad and not believe the good. And I think it's way more important. If you have 56% of your rankings are 5-star reviews and less than 1% are 1-star reviews, maybe you think, okay, people like this book, but it's that 1-star review. Somebody gave me a 1-star review for this book, actually, and said I had a pretentious vocabulary. And I was like, I know you think that's a 1 star, but that's a 5 star compliment to me.
Yeah,
And
that's
that's my
true.
new band name. Pretentious Vocabulary is my new band name.
Okay, yeah, because it's so funny when people say that because that's you're into
I'm a
words.
writer. I'm
That
supposed to have a pretentious vocabulary. It's my
I-
job.
that's it.
It's like telling a surgeon, you're too good at your stitches.
Yeah, you don't want to dumb it down. Please don't dumb it down because actually, so many authors do. They take this to heart and they will do
Yeah.
something like that. They will change their style. They will change. It happens when you get criticized. When I started this YouTube channel, I got criticized and I was really upset. They said the interviews are too long. And I said, actually, for the next few interviews, I made them shorter. And I realized afterwards, I get an author on. They've worked for years on a book. They deserve what, an hour, whatever. I'm not going to just say, oh, because somebody says they can only concentrate for 20 minutes. I should make my interviews 20 minutes. I could talk to you for 3 hours, and I'm sure
I'm sure we would have plenty of room to fill even after that. I
exactly.
mean, if you love books, yeah, let's just talk about the books and don't worry about how long it takes.
Exactly, exactly. This is so much fun for me to be able to help, as you said, when a reader finds the right book at the right time in their life, and no matter what it is. And I have an author who wrote a book actually while she was sitting in the hospital and her husband was dying. She wrote her first book there. And then when she actually finally published it and it came out, so many people were touched by her story and they
Well,
were giving her book to people who needed this comfort. And the book wasn't about her husband dying. The book was actually a joyful book about their love affair, about the start of their love. But people knew how she wrote it. And so she had this courage to sit there and write a love story in such a perilous time. And this is the kind of thing that writers can do, touch hearts. Now, of course, you do get to do events. Thank goodness we're over the pandemic. So, have you done any big events so far, talking to groups yet?
I did a huge library event a couple of weeks ago, but the book technically is out on November 1st.
Yeah.
So my launch is on November 1st, and that's my first big official event. And then I have another one on the 2nd. So I'll be at Parnassus in Nashville on the 1st and Scottsdale Poison Pen bookstore on the 2nd. And then most of the rest of it's virtual this time, which is phenomenal for me. So I've been on the road. I think this last trip it gets me to 104 or 105 nights away, um, which is a lot. A third of the year I've spent on the road. So I'm excited to be wrapping this all up. But I did a phenomenal library event, the Vive la Livre Foundation banquet, and did a keynote for them. And we had so much fun. They were just great people. And it was a pretty big room.
And so, do you think people will come to your events now and they'll wait to see if somebody comes in the back of the crowd and looks at you and you're going to
And I
faint?
fainted. God, I hope not. I really hope not. Obviously, this is not my story at all. And it's a little weird to be writing about an author who dies on tour and then go on tour. But it's a fantasy world, obviously. Nobody in the book world would do anything silly.
So, no high school boyfriend. Were you homecoming queen in your high school?
Oh, Lord, no, not at all. I was very much a misfit. I had friends in all the little cliques. I floated between all the cliques. I was a jock, though. I did track and golf and volleyball and basketball. And so, yeah, I was more of a jock than anything else.
Okay, so nobody from your past is going to be showing up.
I'm friends with my ex-boyfriends and friends with my first kiss and all of that. So, yeah,
Yeah, so you're safe.
the beauty of social media, right?
Yeah.
Is we all get back in touch and say hi, and everybody knows my husband, and he's awesome. So
And
my first kiss and my husband and I went out to dinner. Yeah,
yeah,
not homecoming.
when is your high school reunion? Have you gone back to your high school reunion?
I have not. I don't feel the need to go back and
I
connect.
would think that you would be so popular I don't know what year it will be coming up to, but you should go to the next one and give them a
Yep.
kick. And
Popular is definitely not a term that I would use when talking about myself.
I
No.
think
I was
I
a
think
very bookish kid. I was bookish and quiet and loud when I got nervous and probably really inappropriate. And just, I was much more comfortable with my books than I was with people.
so. Talking about books that you were reading at that age, those high school years. What books do you remember that you liked and you didn't like?
Mm. Wow, I liked everything because I'm a very agnostic reader. My parents had many bookshelves and a lot of books. We just downsized them and I just packed up all the books, gave away 400, took a whole huge chunk of them home with me. My favorites were the dictionary and the encyclopedia. But I was reading all of the Shakespeare in high school, and we did a lot of Edgar Allan Poe, which probably influenced a lot of what I do because I really like him. We did a lot of poetry modules. We did all of the usual Sound and the Fury and Flannery O'Connor and all of the Southern writers. A lot of popular fiction on in my spare time. So I was reading Grisham. I was reading Jean Auel, Clan of the Cave Bear. That series was absolutely one of my favorites.
Oh, I
Uh,
love that series. I think
yeah.
that is such a fantastic series. And the books are so thick. This new book, A Very Bad Thing, is has a lot of pages, but her books were like, I
Oh,
don't know,
I mean,
900 pages?
yeah, they're huge. They're absolutely huge. And so they were incredible. I loved that kind of book because you learned, right? I always loved something that would teach me about a different world. Read a lot of science fiction. My dad was big, he worked for Lockheed Martin. We were in the aerospace industry. There was a lot of science fiction, a lot of intellectual mechanical stuff and philosophy and engineering books. Literally, I would read anything that I could get my hands on because
Sounds like
we were
me.
doing Jane Austen. We read Austen in high school. We obviously did 1984, Aldous Huxley. I did a lot of the classics that are not considered appropriate classics now, which is really interesting. Um, and then again, a lot of popular fiction, anything that was there at the drugstore or the grocery store to be grabbed. And I would go for the thickest one, right? Because I had an allowance and I had to do that, right? So I would get the thickest, biggest paperback I could find. But yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
I read
Oh,
all.
just don't remind me 1984. When I knew what the ending was going to be, somebody told me, and I've read that book quite a few times over the year. I have never read the last two chapters. I've never read them. I know
Oh,
what's going to happen, but I can't physically.
hmm.
And that happened in high school. I got to that point. I said, I don't want to know.
Yeah, you really should. I think, oh gosh, The Fountainhead, Ayn Rand.
Oh, now
Yeah,
that one I love. Oh,
yeah, read that. And then I read Anthem, which I absolutely, if you haven't read Anthem, that's a really interesting, it's very short, very interesting book that is an allegory for Plato's Cave, which ironically, Ayn Rand would absolutely hate that comparison because she hated that kind of stuff. But Plato's Cave is one of my favorite allegories. And so I think I read The Republic, I think senior year of high school.
okay.
And yeah,
Yeah.
it's
So reading for me and for you obviously is very important, and that's what I'm trying to encourage people who are doing NaNoWriMo and who want to write, and all those people who are dreaming of writing to actually read books too, because that's important, and they can start if they haven't started, they can start with A Very Bad Thing, which is actually a very good thing. And as you said, it's out on November 1st. It's a really fantastic book. I just like this so much. I hope that people will subscribe to Joy on Paper so that I can bring more authors like you to to everybody, because it is just wonderful to talk to you. And
thank you. This
you know,
has been really fun.
well, it's great, and I actually maybe we'll have you back, and we can talk about let's talk about let's talk about some of your other books, because your writing is fantastic. So, JT Ellison is your website. right?
Yes,
jtellison.com.
jtellison.com. And you can find me on most of the socials as Thriller Chick.
Thriller Chick. That's appropriate for you. Okay. Thriller Chick, you have definitely given people thrills. All the people who get this book, you will have thrills because it is exactly, it does the job. Boy, oh boy, if you want thrills and on a nice, cool night, now that it's fall, I love the fall. Isn't it nice? Oh, especially in Nashville, it's a lovely time of year there. So again,
really is.
JT Ellison, I think you're fantastic, a wonderful author. You have a great attitude, and your books have touched so many millions of hearts and tingled so many spines. That's a nice way to think of you, the spine tingler. So
that is, I like it. I'm all, let's do that.
Okay. JT, thank you so much for being on Joy on Paper Live. It's been an absolute joy to talk to you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Thank you for having me.
Okay, and all my viewers, it's worth it to listen to this entire thing. I'm not going to cut her off at 20 minutes. I don't care what you say. Okay, so I'll have you back, and then we can talk some more. All right?
Great. That sounds great.
Okay. Bye now.
Bye.
Oh, now that was a nice interview. Whoa, I love it. Anyway, please subscribe to Joy on Paper Live and leave a comment for the authors because authors really appreciate comments. JT, she's a fantastic author. She knows what she's doing when it comes to tingling your spine. So get this book and make sure that you leave a comment. Please subscribe to Joy on Paper Live so that I can bring you more interviews with fascinating authors. Turn the house down.